And what is the concept mitzvotai, my mitzvahs? What is the difference between these two aspects? Why are there two different concepts? Why is there a concept of Bechukotia, my statutes? And why is there a concept of mitzvot? It's mitzvosai tishmoru. Isn't chukim mitzvahs? Isn't the concept of a statue a mitzvah? Why is there separation between these two concepts? And we'll come to a Rashi concerning that. We'll come to the Rashi. There's a Rashi on it that answers this question. But before we go to the Rashi, let's go to, he brings down Rabbi Bechukotia ben Ashri, ben Bechukotia, another rabbi in the 12th century, who gave another interpretation on this meaning of this two concepts. In Bechukotia telechu, that you're going to follow my statutes, that's mitzvah, and you're going to do my mitzvahs. But God promises, let's say the second verse, as is brought down over here, God promises that if you follow my statutes and you will follow my commandments, I will give you rain in their time. And the land will yield its produce. So God says, you do yours, I'll do mine. And the trees of the field will give forth its fruits. So what is the meaning of the word Bechukotia? So over here, Rabbi Bechukotia says, what is the meaning of the word Bechukotia, my statutes? Says in text number 2, the verse mentions 3 categories of mitzvahs. So he says actually there's 3 mitzvahs. In Bechukotia is one, Etz mitzvotai is another mitzvah, Va'asisem is a third mitzvah. 3 different categories of commandments. What are the 3 different categories of commandments? Namely, the rational, traditional, and beyond reason. There are those mitzvahs that are rational, don't kill, don't steal. These are rational mitzvahs. Everybody can understand these mitzvahs, that you shouldn't kill and you shouldn't steal. And then there's traditional mitzvahs, like Passover. You keep Passover tradition to remember going out of Mitzrayim, remember going out of Egypt. Keep Shabbos to remember the creation of the world. That God created the world in 6 days and rested on Shabbos. And then you have beyond reason, chukim, beyond reason. There's no reason to this mitzvah. It's a mitzvah that has no reason, like keeping kosher. Keeping kosher, the laws of purity and impurity. These are super rational reasons. Have no reason. Mishpatim are rational laws handed down to us from God. We're aided to tradition rights that bear testimony to God. Presence in the creation of the world. Chukim are statutes that do not have any apparent reason. There's no reason. Now, why would God make mitzvahs that have no reason? Why? What is the reason why there's no reason? Why would there be such a concept? So therefore, the Medrash says in text number 3, page 70, he gives you the general reason of why there's no reason. He doesn't give you the reason of the mitzvah. He's telling you why there's no reason. This is a statue, a chuk of the Torah. This is a statue because the Satan is the evil inclination. The world calls it Satan. I don't know if the Satan is the same thing as the Satan, what the world means of Satan. This is a Satan in the Gemara, Jewish tradition. Satan is the evil inclination, the general evil inclination. The nation of the world taunt Israel. saying, what is this command? Why are you doing this? What are you doing it? Why are you not eating pig? It's why are you not eating milk and meat together? Why are you doing all this? Why do you need to have separate kitchens? Why do you need all these laws? I can understand keeping Passover. It's a nice thing. We also have holidays. I can understand, even Shabbos, have a day of rest. I mean, it makes sense. It's a nice tradition. Well, this doesn't make any sense. What's wrong with a pig? Why don't you eat that? So, and what purpose does it have? What's the purpose? What's the purpose of not eating these animals? What's the purpose of purity and impurity? What is the purpose? Now, this question doesn't have to be asked by some non-Jew. We all ask the question. Why? What is the purpose of not wearing wool and linen together? What is the reason? Why can't we wear shatnez? It's called shatnez. You're not allowed to wear wool and linen together. Why? Does it bother anybody? Why does it bother God that I'm wearing wool and linen together? Who cares? What's the end of the world? And millions of people are wearing wool and linen together. So what is the reason? Therefore, the Torah uses the word statute. Therefore, the Torah says no. The Torah tells us that you're a Jew. You're a Jew. The answer is you're a Jew. And God asked a Jew this mitzvah, not because of any reason, because that's what God asked. Therefore, the Torah, that's what the Torah says. The answer is that's what the Torah puts statutes in the system that there are certain things that a Jew does that makes no sense. Doesn't make sense. Not everything has to make sense. Not everything. You have to have an answer for everything. So the Eibishter put it in the system, in the mitzvahs, that you're going to do a mitzvah. Actually, a mitzvah you do every day. You're hopefully not eating today, not kosher. So you're going to do it every single day. And it's a mitzvah that doesn't have a reason. I have decreed it, and that's it. A Jew accepts what we know as a statement of Kabbalah's El Malchus Shamayim, acceptance of the yoke of heaven. So we have to come to a realization that not everything we know. We don't believe in God because we only understand Him. So the question you might ask the question, why do we put all of it in one verse? Why do we put all these things, mitzvahs, if chukim, statutes, have no reason? Why do you put it all together? And you shall follow my chukim, my mishpatim, and my ideas. Why do you put it all in one verse? The other two make sense. The chukim are something have no reason. Why are you putting them all in one pasuk? So the Rebbe, that's where the Rebbe comes in. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, in text number 4a, the Rebbe answers the question. And this is a fascinating answer that the Lubavitcher Rebbe gives. And in a way transforms all mitzvahs. And he says, the reason why all of them are together is because in truth, all mitzvahs, text number 4a on page 71. Here's the Lubavitcher Rebbe statement. If you don't have the book, listen to what I'm going to say. All mitzvahs, even rational ones, must be fulfilled, not because we appreciate the reason. Even though God gave us a reason why we keep Shabbos and why we keep Passover, and it makes a lot of common sense why you shouldn't steal and why you shouldn't cheat and why you shouldn't do many things between man and man. All things you shouldn't do. Lashon hara, all these things make a lot of common sense. But that's not the real reason. That's the extra credit. The real reason is not because of any reason, because God said so. You're coming in a couple of weeks to Matan Torah, to the giving of the Torah, which is the Ten Commandments. Our sages say that all the commandments are in the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments is symbolic to all the commandments in the Torah. In those Ten Commandments, most Jews, you ask them, how many commandments are they? They say 10 commandments. They're not 10 commandments. There's 613 commandments. So why did God only give 10? Because in these 10 actually you have all of them. You can find all of them. But even the 10 commandments itself is such a mixture between man and God and man and man. I mean, you put, I am God, your God, and keep the Shabbos, but don't kill and don't steal and don't do murder and don't do adultery. How do you mix this? You make a cholent. How do you put this whole together? Either 10 commandments, which should be holy commandments. What is it in the 10 commandments? Throw in, don't kill. Everybody knows not to kill. If there was not in the 10 commandments, you would start killing. If it was not in the 10 commandments, don't do adultery, we would do adultery. These are logical commandments. I can understand, keep the Shabbos. If it wasn't in the commandments, so we wouldn't keep Shabbos. I'm God, your God. Okay, in the 10 commandments. Honor your father and mother is a hard commandment, so it needs to be in the 10 commandments. But Chassidus tells you that that's the reason why they're together. Don't do steal, don't do adultery, don't murder, because God says so. Not because it only makes logical sense. Do it because God says so. As the Rebbe once said, if you take God out of the situation, then you can even have a country that will legalize murdering other people. It became a law of the country. That you can kill people. You should kill people. No, God says don't kill. Even though it makes rational sense, any rational person can come to a conclusion you shouldn't kill. But really, the real reason is because God said don't kill. So really, all the mitzvahs should be done like a chukkah, like a decree. All mitzvahs should be done because that is what God decreed. And they were given to the Sinai with a basic sense of commitment. Why is that important? Why is that important? The Rebbe goes in text number 4b on page 72. As I said, this is a sikha. This is a talk of the Lubavitcher Rebbe that was printed. First, so in 4b, first, if a mitzvah observance is predicted on a personal conviction as to their sound logic, it will ultimately lead to a situation our sages describe. Today, the Yetzer Hara tells you to do X. Tomorrow, Y, until it's serving idols outright. And I just said that. If you're going to try on logic, logic will change everything. If you're going to base Yiddishkeit only on logic, then you're going to destroy Yiddishkeit. You're going to destroy Judaism. If you're going to take the Torah as totally and only a logical book, you are basically going to close it. You're going to destroy it. Now, I'm not telling you shouldn't take it with logic. I'm saying only on logic. The Torah needs to be taken logically, and at the same moment, you need to take it at the same moment that what the logic you have is not the real reason. It's the logical reason. It's thank God that God gave us a logic to this concept. But that's not the real reason. The real reason is godly. The real reason is God better. For so has God commanded. To explain, the Rebbe says, is so much as your Yetzer Hara is one telling you to follow the mitzvah, If you're only going to do it because, oh, it makes sense to me. Like I hear many people tell me, when I'll understand it, I will do it. If you can explain it to me, I will do it. So it means basically he only does anything because what he understands. And if it's only going to be based on what I understand, namely because it makes a perfect sense, and not simply because God instructed you to do so, you are essentially unmooring yourself from God. The whole Yiddishkeit is anchored on one concept. The whole Torah, the whole Judaism is all anchored on one concept, and that's God. The second you say, I don't need God, it makes logical sense to me. I don't need God to tell me not to kill. It makes logical sense to me. I don't need God to tell me not to steal. It makes logical sense to me. Then basically, I've separated myself from God for these two aspects. And God forbid, slowly as I separate based on my logic, I can change my logic. I can say maybe sometimes you should steal. Maybe it's not even stealing. We say this, that as kids, we always wanted to watch Robin Hood. He was the hero. The hero in the Torah, he's a ganef, he's a thief. Ganef, no hero. I talk about the people that were after him and how great they were. If they were tzaddikim, righteous people, not, that's a separate issue. But it doesn't make him right. He's a ganef. He's a robber. Why would you make a robber into a hero? We show this, and we watched it. We show this kids to think that this is the concept of being a hero. To rob from people. That's what the Gemara calls a mitzvah baba aveda. I'm robbing to give it to the poor. You're a ganef. You're stealing. You're not doing any mitzvah. The Torah says, you shall not steal. Oh, but I need to help somebody. So, go work and help somebody. But we rationalize it. Oh, he's helping people. We're stealing for the rich and giving to the poor. What a hero. He's a thief. Deserves to be in jail. So it's important that we understand that concept. That we put the chukkah, the Torah says in Bechukotia telechu. That the first thing he mentions in the verse is the chukim, is the decrees, is the statutes, the mitzvahs that have no reason. Because really everything else, mitzvahsai, asisam osam, those two other mitzvahs are also should be done because God says so. Second, mitzvah observance left to irrational alone is missing a critical element of religious life, and that's God again. To leave God out of any part of our religious commitment is senseless at best, and as such, everything we do must be unguided by the sense of blind faith. We have to believe in God. Everything must be connected to God. In the Gemara, it says the whole Bachavaku came a great prophet and said, I'm gonna establish the entire Torah on one concept. If you want to establish the entire Torah on one concept, I can do that because the concept is God. And that's what a Jew needs to establish. His entire philosophy, his entire concept, his entire involvement is all to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to serve God. And then the Rebbe continues. 4c, another reason why mitzvahs observance must not predict on logic and reason alone, even if we argue that a person will indeed fulfill the mitzvah, they will still lack a critical element. The sediment that they are something from and connected with God as a part of Torah. It's more than that, the Rebbe says. The Rebbe says the importance of doing a mitzvah because it's based on God is because we want a relationship with God. The more we do things for the sake of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whether it's positive things or not do negative things, that creates a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with God. So the more you create this relationship, whether it's on big things or on small things, whether it's on things that we think are important or things that we think are not important, but we say, like it's like a relationship with another person. The more I say, I'm doing this for you, or I'm not going to do it because of you, that creates the bond. That creates the relationship, the connection between these two entities. So the more I say, I'm not going to steal because God said I shouldn't steal, and I want my relationship with God. I'm not gonna talk lashon hara because God said I shouldn't talk lashon hara. Just like I'm not gonna eat non-kosher. The truth is, there's no difference between eating non-kosher and talking lashon hara. They're both a negative commandment in the Torah. They're both the concept where God asks you not to do it. So God asks you not to kill. He asks you not to steal. He asks you not to eat non-kosher. He asks you not to talk evil talk about somebody. He asked you to keep Shabbos. He asked you all these things. So in essence, this is the way the Rebbe explains why the first mitzvah, why the first statement in the verse is in Bechukotia telechu, and in my statutes you will go. But let's go to the Rashi, because the Rashi, the commentator on the Chumash, who wrote his interpretation to a 5-year-old, meaning that he said, I wrote this interpretation in its most simplest form, that every simple human being and every single Jew can comprehend, even a child. And Rashi says a different interpretation. And it's in your book on page 74, text number 5. Rashi comes and says the reason why, what's Bechukotia? Rashi asks the same question. In Bechukotia telechu, if you're my statutes, you will go, and you'll follow my mitzvahs. Bechukotia is the statutes, is the mitzvahs, is the commandment. So what is the separation in the verse? So listen to the Rashi. Rashi changes it, and Rashi says as follows: if you follow my statutes, I might think that this refers to the fulfillment of mitzvahs. However, when the scripture says, and you observe my commandments, mitzvah fulfillment has already been stated. So what then is the meaning if you follow my statutes? And Rashi answers, the meaning is you must toil in Torah. Rashi says the simple meaning in the verse, in Bechukotia telechu, for my statutes you will follow, is the learning of Torah. Why is it called a chukah? That's the question. So why do you call the learning of Torah a chukah? Chukah means, in general, a chukah means a decree. What does the decree have to do with the learning of Torah? So what is the meaning of a chukah? So Rashi, so to answer this question, the answer is that it needs to be implanted within you. In Bechukotia telechu, chukah also means to be engraved. Chukah chakakti, I engraved an engraving. Chukah means to be engraved. Chaku. To engrave, when you engrave on a monument, you put letters. It's called engraving, a chukah, hakika. So you have to learn the Torah in a way that it's engraved, and that's why the Rashi uses the word you must toil in the learning of Torah. Amelim b'divrei Torah. Don't learn the Torah as some kind of some kind of a novel. Learn the Torah, toil in the learning of Torah. So you might say that what means to toil in the learning of Torah means, as it's brought down in text number 6, that when it comes to learning Torah, you have to comprehend what you're learning. When the study of the oral tradition, the Alter Rebbe writes in the Jewish law of learning, he writes, when you're studying the oral law, not studying Chumash. When you open a Chumash, you can just read it. But when you're studying oral law, Talmud, the Mishnah, what of Jewish law, you have to understand it. If you do not understand what you're learning, it's not considered Torah study at all. It's not like reading a pasuk. If you want to do the mitzvah of learning Torah, you need to understand the learning of Torah. If not, you might be making you're not learning Torah, basically. You're not doing the concept of learning Torah. You should toil in the learning of Torah. If you take a siddur, if you take a prayer book, if you open a prayer book, in the morning we make a bracha. In the morning we make a blessing over the Torah. It's in your siddur. You have a siddur, Chabad siddur. It's on page 8 in the siddur. So with there, it's like the blessing we do when a man gets called up to the reading of the Torah. Here, this blessing, every person could do to say this blessing. You don't have to be called up to the Torah to say this blessing. Here you have a blessing over learning of Torah, which every man makes at the ark when he gets called up to the Torah. See on page 8, you have Bechukotia Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachabanu Mikol Ha'amim V'Nasan Lanu Es Torosai Baruch Atah Hashem Nesein HaTorah. You make a blessing over the giving of the Torah. Right after that, you made a blessing over the giving of the Torah. What do you have to do? Something. You have to learn Torah. So right after that, you say a verse. You say the blessings of the priest, which is our verses in the Torah. And then you learn a Mishnah. You learn a very simple Mishnah on page 9, which is Torah She'Bal Peh. So you have Torah She'Biksav, which is the priestly blessings, is the written Torah, and you're saying that that's the blessing that you made over the blessings that you made over the Torah, and then you say a Mishnah. It's a Mishnah and Peah. It's a very simple Mishnah that everybody can read the English. You understand the Mishnah. So you say Torah She'Bal Peh and Torah She'Biksav. You automatically, when you said the blessing over the Torah, man and women and child, they all make this blessing. You read a Chumash, a piece of Chumash, and you read that's Torah, the written law, and you read the oral law. They've specifically put a Mishnah of the oral law, which is simple to comprehend. One of the very simple Mishnahs. Everybody can read it and comprehend. You don't have to toil very hard. Why do they specifically pick an easy thing? Because they don't want your bracha should be a bracha in vain. If you don't comprehend it, then it's a question of your bracha. But they already saved you with putting the chumash there, so the bracha goes on the chumash. The question goes back. So that's the meaning. In Bechukotia telechu, that you should toil in the learning of Torah. The question is asked, according to this, why would the Torah use the word Bechukotia? It's a very interesting expression. Even you have to like push it into this explanation. Why would you use, when it comes to the learning of Torah, would you use the word Bechukotia? It's really a question on Rashi, according to Rashi's interpretation of this verse. So to answer this question, the Rebbe brings down the Alter Rebbe on page 75 in your book, text number 7. The words, if you follow my statutes, Bechukotai, can be interpreted by the means of a metaphor from a vessel that needs to be carved out from the inside. So too, we must carve out. When you take a piece of wood, and you want to make this wood into a vessel, into a bowl, cup, you have to carve out the vessel from the inside. When you carve out the vessel from the inside, you give the capability for this piece of wood that was impossible to put something in it, through carving out the inside, which that's chakika. You're carving it, you are grinding out the inside, you can put something now in it. For you, for us, right? To be able to take in to myself Torah, I need to carve out something inside. I need to make space for that learning. If I come to learn with a full mind, I have no space for that teaching, then it cannot penetrate, it cannot come in. There's no vessel. To make a vessel, you need to hakika, you need to carve out, you need to make some space. Make some space. So too, we must carve out a space in the animal soul so it can thereafter follow, namely to mature to a state of love, to be included in the oneness of God. If I want to connect to God, I have to make space for him. If God's going to make space for me, I need to make space for him. How do I make space for him? Is when I give away something from my nefesh habahamis. I give away something from my animalistic soul. When I'm willing to give away, to make room, so I give some space, like right now, you could have all been watching a movie. You took some time and you made space to learn. You made space. And the truth is, we constantly make space for God in our lives. Whether it's this time of learning, whether it's prayer, whether it's Shabbos, Yom Tov, we're making space. We're taking something that we could have done something else with, and we're making space. Space in physical space, space in time, space in money. We constantly try to make space for God. Carving out the inside is accomplished through particular mitzvahs of chukim category. So the Rebbe says, the Alter Rebbe says that if you really want, making space is when I have no logic. If I have logic, it's about me again. So I didn't make space for God. I made more space for myself. So, wow, It's a wonderful thing. I think I'll do this mitzvah. I'm going to gain. If I'm doing the mitzvah that is a chukkah, not because of me, so it makes sense to me. That is truly making space. So when I do a mitzvah that does not make sense, that's when I make space for God. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful interpretation of the Alter Rebbe. Such as the Parah Dumo, Tzitzis, and Tefillin. It's interesting, the Alter Rebbe over here adds Tzitzis and Tefillin. And he puts into the category of a chukkah. Because the truth is, that I take time in the day to put on tefillin, I don't really know the real reason of tefillin. That I wear tzitzis, I don't really know the real reason, especially in Florida, it's hot. It's a chukkah. It's really a chukkah. Most mitzvahs that we do, whether we think we know the real reason, really we don't know the real reason. This is the Shabbat level. This is the putting on tefillin is connecting ourselves to God, and it takes time. It takes time, especially if I daven in my tefillin. So 40 to half an hour, 45 minutes of my day. That's putting space away for God. That's a chukkah. That's where each and every one of us makes space for our Kadosh Baruch Hu. God, and that's why God says, I will give you, God puts away what God will do for us. Make space for him, or make space for you, which has no logical reason whatsoever. This is because these mitzvahs, in fact, stem from a lofty place that is beyond reason. That's why the Alter Rebbe once said, explains, that if you really want to know the mitzvah that is important to you, is the mitzvah you don't want to do. Why would he say that? Why would a mitzvah that you don't want to do is a mitzvah that's important to you? Because that's where you make space. That's where God is important to me. When it's something I don't want to do, and I do it because God asked me to do it, that's where I've proven God is important to me. If I want to do it because of my own personal reasons, my own personal gains, then it's about me. I just made more space for myself. If I do it because that's what God wanted me to do, I really don't want to do it. I really don't want to go to the minyan. I really don't want to daven. I really don't want to put on tefillin. I really don't want to do this. But I say, you know what? I'm going to do it. Why? Because that's making space for our Kodesh Baruch. You know, Chassidus tells us the most important thing that God wanted was a dira betachtonim. It's a very interesting expression. God wanted a house in this world. Really, that means God wanted you to make space for him in your house in this world. The Lubavitcher Rebbe said, you need a mezuzah. I mean, the Torah says, you need a mezuzah on your door. Make space for God. Then the Rebbe said, you need a bayis malas farim. Your house is full of books. Have Jewish books. Make space. You, Baruch Hashem, all have bookshelves. Make space for God's books. Make space for Torah books. Why is there only a space for every other book? And there's no space for Chumashim, a book of Chumashim, a book of Talmud, a set of Talmud. Make space. Give space. The Rebbe said, you hang up everything else in your house. You have a beautiful home. Let the pushka be part of the home. Let it be banged into the world. Give space. Don't put the pushka somewhere. It's like, you know, the pushka is the wandering piece of your house. Everything else has its space. Everything else has its place. And suddenly the pushka we can never find. Because it's like the wandering Jew. Give it a space. Bang it in the wall. Give it a space. Give every mitzvah a space. Let it not be hidden someplace. We got to find it. We don't know where it is. We don't have it. We got to borrow it. Give space. That is what God wanted from every Jew, to give a space for him. There are the raw will of God himself. And it's through these mitzvahs that flow from such a lofty space, that a space is carved out inside that. And that's where, when you want to bring down a very lofty concept, you bring it down in the most mundane space. Only a very lofty concept, Chassidus says, can come down in a very mundane place. Something that's not so great cannot come down in a place that it cannot fit. Something that is extremely lofty can come down in any place, whether it's fit or doesn't. The soul is engraved with the love of God for his or her very soul to be included in the oneness of God through these mitzvahs. So the Rebbe takes this beautiful statement of the Alter Rebbe and he translates it in the aspect of learning Torah too. And he says in text number 8, when a person studies Torah with a true toil, the type of hard work associated with engraving, as opposed to simply writing, chakika, engraving, it affects a sense of engraving in the heart of the person who studies it. Learn Torah in the same way like you toil on a job. You work hard. It's not easy to work. Whether you work with your hands or you work with your mind, or you work with your whole body, it's not easy. But when you finish the job, you feel accomplished. Learn Torah in the same way. Don't sit there and drink a cup of coffee and sit relaxed. Get into it. Learn Torah. Toil over the learning of Torah. And the Rebbe writes, in the heart of a person, if he or she suffers from a heart of stone, should they toil in Torah, their stony heart will be penetrated by the rigor of Torah. As the verse states, stones that water eroded. And we see that as we celebrated Lag BaOmer, which is the celebration of Rabbi Akiva. We know Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva's is the celebration of Lag BaOmer is the day that his students stopped dying. So he's part of the Lag BaOmer celebration. How did Rabbi Akiva? Rabbi Akiva started off his life at 40 years old. His life of learning. They say in the Gemara that at 40 years old, he has still not learned anything. He didn't know Albez. Once he encountered a hole in a rock. Who bore the soul, he asked. It was the water that constantly falls on it every day, they told him. He looked up, he saw a drop of water, drop of water, drop of water. Akiva, you're not aware of this verse. Stones that water erode. You take the hardest thing, the softest thing. But if you take water, you continuously drop it upon this hard rock, it's going to ultimately penetrate the rock. Akiva immediately made the following calculation. If soft water can eventually penetrate a hard stone, surely Torah, which is strong like iron, can certainly penetrate my heart, flesh, and blood. So he immediately set out to learn Torah. At 40 years old, he went to verse. And the truth is, the rest of the story, most of us know that it was his wife. If it wasn't for his wife, Rachel, who got him to learn Torah, he wouldn't be Rabbi Akiva, who became the Rabbi Akiva that he was. So the Rebbe says, whether chukah means a mitzvah or chukah means the Torah, Do mitzvahs because that's the will of God. Learn Torah because that's the connection to God. And that's why the Rebbe continues and says, even though chukah most times means a mitzvah, over here Rashi says it means actually the learning of Torah. Why? So in text number 10, the Rebbe writes, Bechukotia are mitzvahs called chukim. In the concept of Torah study, this means that our Torah study must be a chukah-like fashion, namely with raw commitment. While it's true that we must understand the Torah with our human intellect, that alone is built on a foundation of faith, namely the drive to understand, doesn't flow from personal enjoyment. That's simply because God instructed that we must study with our own intellect. Thank God. God said, I want you to use the intellect. But it's God who asked us to use the intellect. Not that I want to gain intellect. It's that God asked me to use the intellect. God asked me that I should use my own intellectual comprehension, my wisdom, understanding, knowledge in the learning of Torah. But it's not really about my wisdom. It's about God. Such an attitude leads to the toil of Torah. It's about God. Namely, they learn beyond their natural tendency. If you're only going to learn Torah, what you enjoy, what I enjoy, then I won't learn the whole Torah. I won't thrive in it. Whatever I understand, I'm happy. Why should I go more than I understand? If I'm learning Torah, because I want to learn God's wisdom, then I'm never going to be happy. I'm going to want to learn more and more and more. And the statement goes, learning never ends. There's never enough learning. Nobody can say that he learned enough. That's what the Mishnah in Bechukotia says. If somebody says I've acquired wisdom, does not know what wisdom is. There's no concept of acquiring wisdom. You see in Jewish schools, religious schools, there's no graduation, really. Don't graduate. I never graduated. I never graduated high school, Hebrew in Jewish education, high school, elementary. I never graduated high school. In yeshiva, there's no graduation. Never graduated 770. In essence, I'm still in the process of learning. There's no such thing of graduation. You have completed your studies. No such thing, not when it comes to Torah study. Because it's godly study. How can there be a completion to godly study? In Bechukotia telechu. Learn the Torah like a chuk of a mitzvah. Learn the Torah because it's godly. It's a godly knowledge. It's an unlimited knowledge. That's why we can learn Bahara Bechukotia, this Pasha, over and over and over again. We have read this Pasha 50 years already. Same portion, nothing has changed. We're going to read it again this Shabbos. Because whatever we understood in the portion last year, we understand in the portion more this year. Because we toiled harder in the portion. Because we wanted to learn God's wisdom more in the portion this year. So, namely, they learn beyond their natural tendency, motivated purely by personal enjoyment. Torah study would be limited to the contours of what a person enjoys, would never lead to the true toil. Learn Torah because it's God, because it's God's wisdom. Look at Rabbi Yehuda Hapinini, page number 79, text number 11. Look how he expresses it. Not even angels are able to receive the secrets of God's words, etched in their very being. Certainly then, we simple humans can't dare to perceive or comprehend your greatness. If an angel, which has no evil temptations, cannot perceive you, certainly we, who possess evil urges, at times defy our own creator, we do not dare to assume that we understand God? How can our understanding, which can be swatted away like a mosquito, find grace in your eyes to gain any understanding of you? The sum total of what we know is that we don't know you at all. From everything we work so hard to understand, we know only that you exist. Look at the words of Rabbi Yosef Albo. He was a great rabbi, a great philosopher, on page number 80 in text number 12. From this, we may not get an idea of the great joy. From this, we may get, an idea of the great joy and delight that God has in the apprehension of his own essence. For he has an infinite number of perfections, and each one is infinite in worth. Therefore, no other being can apprehend his essence. As the wise man said, when they asked him if he knew the true essence of God, he said, if I knew him, I would be him. In other words, there's no one who apprehends his essence except God. Through his existence is evidence most plainly to all from his acts. Praise be him who surpasses us with his perfection, who is hidden from us despite his intense visibility, as the light of the sun and as the agreeableness are hidden from those who weak light. The defect, understanding, does not prove his non-existence. Whoa, the most that we can understand about God is that we can't understand him, as the wise man said. The sum total of what we know of you is that we don't know you. Can't comprehend God. And if you can't comprehend God, Chassidus says, you really cannot comprehend the Torah. And if you cannot really comprehend the Torah, you really cannot comprehend the mitzvahs. So why do we do all this? Because it's God. Because God wants us to do all this. God wants us to learn Torah. God wants us to do mitzvahs. It's all to fulfill God's wishes for each and every single one of us. And that's why the Alter Rebbe, I'm going to conclude this, almost done. That's why the Alter Rebbe in text number 13 says, his essence and being and knowledge are all absolute one, without any composition. Therefore, just as it's impossible for any creature in the world to comprehend the essence of the Creator and his being, so is impossible to comprehend the essence of his knowledge, which is one with God himself. It is possible only to believe with a faith that transcends intellect and comprehension. So really, the Alter Rebbe says, that's the truth. How smart you think you are. How smart do you think I am? That I comprehend why I do a mitzvah. They're the mitzvah of God. These are mitzvahs of the Eibishter. It's not a mitzvah of a human being. These are the commandments of God. And if they're the commandments of God, I really don't comprehend it. So whatever I comprehended, I think I comprehend, is nothing in the true reasoning of why this mitzvah was given. It's nothing. Anything that I comprehend in the learning of Torah is nothing in the true comprehension of this concept in the Torah, because it is God's comprehension, it's God's will, it's God's knowledge. And therefore, the Rebbe says in text number 14, and we'll end it off text number 14 and then text number 15, and that completes the Sikha. There are two elements to Torah study. A, studying it with intellectual rigor, to work in the learning of Torah. That's with your brains. B, And B, the fact that it connects the student with the one who gave the Torah, God, which is the sanctity of the Torah, the essence of the Torah, which is beyond our human rationalization. The Rebbe ends off the Sikha. If a person assumes that they achieve complete mastery to the Torah study, it only demonstrates that they aren't working hard enough. They don't know what they're doing. They haven't yet got to work. As the previous Rebbe said, even logical parts of the Torah must be followed like chukim. Accordingly, it makes perfect sense that the Torah uses the term Bechukotia when talking about Torah study. Even though the subject matter in all of the Torah, not just the chukim, but also the Eidiot and Mishpatim, when a person toils in the Torah study, they come to the realization that even Mishpatim, even the laws that are seemingly rational, are really chukim. They're rational because God gave us, brought it down, and gave us the capability to give some rationality to it. But really, the real reason is because that was God's will, and that was given by God, which is above and beyond our comprehension. So therefore, the Rebbe ends off. That's the beauty of the verse in Bechukotai Telecha, my friends. Thank God we can rationalize Torah mitzvahs. Thank God we can understand the Gemara, we can understand the Torah. But really, it's all about our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's all about our connection to God. That's the real reason of why we should all want to learn Torah. We should all want to do mitzvahs. Because the more we learn Torah, the more that we thrive in the learning of Torah, the more we become connected, not only spiritually, but ultimately we dig out this hole, we dig out this animalistic soul, and we make space for godliness within ourselves, within our homes, within our communities, and ultimately within the whole world. And that's why we say at the end of this week's Parsha, Chazak, Chazak, v'nis chazek. Let us go from strength to strength, because we have not completed a job until Mashiach comes. And even after Mashiach comes, we're going to still do Torah and mitzvahs. So it's an everlasting avodah. It's an everlasting service. Today we might do it out of lack of knowledge and of lack of feeling. When Mashiach comes, we'll have much deeper knowledge, and therefore we'll have much deeper feeling in why we're doing all these mitzvahs and why we're learning all this Torah. I wish you a wonderful evening. Hope you enjoyed the Sikha of the Rebbe of the portion. Mircham, this coming Thursday night, we continue the second class, which is called This Can Happen. It's a JLI course on the coming of Mashiach. And even though it's a second class, you all can participate. I have a couple of extra books. Call the office, 487-2934. And we're doing it Thursday at 7:30, either at Chabad or on this Zoom number. I wish you all a beautiful, wonderful night. Also tomorrow, 8 a.m., we continue to learn Chumash and Tanya, Chitas of the day, and we continue to do that also, Mitchell, tomorrow at 8 a.m. Wish you all a good night, a happy night, a healthy night, a wonderful night. God bless you all, and we'll see you in Mitchell very soon.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.